Hello and welcome to the very first LyteByte Studios Tech News podcast. I'm Nick and this is Joe.
Hey, I'm Joe.
And yeah, this is the first episode. Uh, basically, what this is LyteByte Studios. We are an entertainment organization. Right now, we have our tech news podcast and our gaming news podcast. Um, the purpose of this podcast is to uh, share all the great news in the technology world with everybody here on the internet. Uh,
And
got
the way
anything else
this
to
is
add?
gonna work, sorry.
Okay.
The way this is gonna work is I really don't know a whole lot about tech. Not a whole lot. So Nick here does, and he's going to explain it to me, and so I will kind of be the eyes through what the audience will see, unless of course they know more than me, which is entirely possible. Then I'm just kind of useless.
Nah, you're not. But it's gonna be a learning experience for like all of us. So yeah. Um, I guess we'll talk a little bit about ourselves here. So I'm Nick here, and I'm pretty well interested with computers and stuff. Running a computer I built here actually, um, and one of the I guess I'm pretty big into gaming and stuff too. I would say so. Yeah, uh, I guess that's really about it. It's interesting when you tell a little about yourself, Joe.
Yeah, similar. Really into gaming. Got the computer that I at least got the parts for and had someone else put together for me. It's got a failing power unit right now. That's fun.
So,
And
would you like to explain your temporary fix?
yeah, I have GTA 5 running in the background, and I think that's keeping my graphics card fan on, making sure that my system doesn't crash right now.
So it's a temporary fix, but yeah.
Yeah,
So I guess that's enough. You want to get started with the news then?
I wouldn't enjoy that.
All right. So uh, this week was, or well, the previous week actually was very big in technology news actually because CES, the Consumer Electronics Show, was going on over in California. Have you heard of CES, Joe?
Yeah, yes, I have.
All right. So yeah, it's a big trade show. A lot of companies from around the world are coming around, showing off like all their latest and greatest new tech. Um, we have a couple things here that we wanted to talk about that were pretty big. I thought. Our first thing, um, make sure you want to pull up that article there, Joe, so you can kind of read along with
Yes.
me. Um, AMD is really bringing a lot of new stuff to the table. AMD has been pretty stagnated for a while in terms of their like processors and stuff. So it's been I think 4 or going on 5 years since they had released the last series of processors or like CPUs. So this is really big news actually because it's potentially going to put AMD kind of back on the map in competition with Intel, who kind of has like a monopoly on CPUs right now.
Yes.
So with their new technology it's called Ryzen, which is built on the new Zen architecture. So like that's kind of the code name for it and everything. And it's actually right around the corner. It's planned for release the first quarter of this year, and it's going to be going. There's already over 16 different motherboards from different manufacturers that are already like in the works and ready to be released, um, as well as from loads of different companies that offer pre-built PCs around the world, which is pretty cool. So, like the first thing here, this is an article by PC World that we're going off of, and so the first thing they talk about here is an army of Zen hardware. So there's a lot of different things from companies such as ASUS, ASRock, MSI, Gigabyte, BioStar, many other different big PC players, and they're all going to be carrying boards which are running on the new AMD chipset, which is a couple different chipsets, and then they'll all be using the AM4 unified socket. So a little bit about the what that is each CPU has, of course, like their like socket that they fit into on the motherboard, and so this is an upgraded version of the AM3 socket, which is AMD's old socket that they used on their CPUs. And so this is going to be like the same socket across all the CPUs. So whether you're buying the like cheapest one or the biggest one, the biggest and best, most powerful CPU, they'll all fit in the same motherboard.
Nice.
So really give people a lot of choices there. And the other really interesting thing about Zen is AMD's planning on a very long lifespan for Zen. So while AMD does, a new sort of architecture every year, couple of years. So, if you want to upgrade to a new processor, you pretty much have to buy a whole motherboard and then buy the new processor, and it gets pretty expensive. All right.
Mm.
So with AMD Zen, they are going to be getting into the with the AM4 socket, they're going to be keeping that the same for the next 4 years. So you can simply upgrade your CPU accordingly whenever you need. And so they're going to be keeping like everything's going to be kind of standardized to an extent. And
Yeah.
they hope that the AM4 platform will last until 2020 then. So what this kind of means is there's a bunch of different chipsets, which do you know what a chipset is, Joe?
A little bit.
All right. So like each motherboard has a specific chipset, and each one of those has certain like properties and features that the CPU can use. So like overclocking a CPU is only available like for Intel, it's only on motherboards that are in the Z line. So with AMD, they have several different chipsets here. So they have a mainstream chipset, which is pretty standard. Um, offers like USB 3.0 and all that, SATA connections, and up to 6 PCI cards. So you can have 6 lanes there.
Hmm.
But the interesting thing is that the mainstream one for your average everyday consumer is actually allows for the CPUs to be overclocked, which is pretty interesting. That normally
Yes.
doesn't happen. And then with the mainstream or then they have the X370 line or chipset, which is for enthusiasts, and that offers a lot more. You can have more PCI slots, more USB ports, and uh, different things along those lines. You can also do Crossfire and SLI, which is where you put 2 graphics cards together in the
Yeah.
system. You can do that together on that one as well. Then there's also a mainstream slash essential one, which is for like budget oriented PCs, which doesn't offer overclocking. So that's kind of for a more cheaper motherboards then. And also the chips they're going to be 8 cores, and they will have, well, one of the ones that was shown is an 8 core CPU with 16 threads, so similar to how Intel does hyper-threading, which will be pretty interesting. And all the chips are overclockable, pertaining as long as you have them on a board that supports it.
Yeah.
And yeah,
And so with 8 cores, that'll be a lot more powerful than say my quad core that I have.
yes. So that's one interesting thing though. Like, not a lot of games actually like take advantage of all the cores in your system, but a lot of them nowadays are getting into like quad cores. So you pretty much need quad cores nowadays.
Hmm.
But yeah, but that'll definitely like be really helpful as games start moving forward and being able to take advantage of those more cores.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much it, really, from kind of what we learned at CES. At CES specifically, AMD had a lot of different like little things set up, so you could compare the performance between that and one of Intel's high-end desktop CPUs, which which is over $1,000 and some. So from what we are kind of learning is that the AMD's Ryzen line is going to be a lot, like significantly lower than Intel's high-end desktop line. So AMD looks like they'll be a great alternative to Intel coming into the rest of 2017. Sorry. Anything else you'd like to add about that?
Um, no, I think we got that.
All right. So the next thing is pretty interesting. There's some news from Intel. So Intel recently released their newest big thing with CPUs, and they have their while AMD was released their or well was showing off their Ryzen line, Intel actually released their new Kaby Lake lines, which is to replace the Skylake lines, and those are like their code names. So with Kaby Lake, it actually really wasn't that exciting. It was just more kind of a incremental upgrade, kind of like here they are. They're a little bit faster. They're a little bit better. They cost a little bit more, and they use a little bit less power. So nothing super interesting. But with Kaby Lake, they now have a new i3, which with the core series, there's the i3, the i5, and the i7. And so you have there's a new i3, specifically the 6350K, which the K means that it's unlocked and you can overclock it. So this CPU is running at 4.2 gigahertz, and it's a dual core with hyperthreading, so it's technically a quad core in theory. And so it can be overclocked. Many have already been overclocking them. Many testers and things have been overclocking them to 5 gigahertz, which is very powerful for an i3. And this is one of the first i3s because the i3 is kind of for like not really budget, but for kind of just mainstream people who want a little bit more power in their computer. So this is pretty interesting. It's kind of a question of who exactly this is marketed for because most people like don't really buy an i3 if they're going to be making a PC for gaming a lot. I know when I built mine, I got an i5.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of interesting. And most people who also would want to get into overclocking, they would have to buy a really high-end motherboard as well, which is over several hundred, which is a couple $100s that supports overclocking then. So, it's, if you're going to be spending that much on a motherboard, you're probably going to be spending that much on a CPU as well. So it's kind of confusing a little bit. Pricing,
Yeah.
the i3 is 150 to 180. The new Kaby Lake i5 is 239, and the i5 or the i7, sorry, is 349.
So it's kind of functioning as like a cheap but still powerful alternative.
Yes, just for people who still do want to get into overclocking. So I guess if you were kind
Yeah.
of like short on cash when you wanted to build your system, you could go with an i3 and then save up some money and get an i7 later, and then you'd still be able to do overclocking and stuff.
Yeah.
Like I think that's really kind of the only thing I can think about it. Other than that, it's kind of interesting. But from what everyone was saying, also they were comparing that to an i5. I know they did on Linus Tech Tips, and they were comparing it to an i5 that was a quad core, and they found pretty much like no differences to it, and the only difference really being price. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But in terms of budget, we can move on to our next story here, which was Intel offering hyperthreading on the Pentium CPU. Now, the Pentium is a very old line that Intel's had all the way back to the 90s, and it's just been kind of updated every time. And so, if you think about it, the Pentium is really a budget CPU,
Yeah.
and they've always been just single core and dual core. So, not the best for gaming because some newer games they don't even like to start up the game if you're running it on a dual core, let alone a single core, because they need that extra power.
Yeah.
Well, what the new Kaby Lake Pentiums have is they have hyperthreading, which hyperthreading is where there's two physical cores on the actual chip, but then the computer detects them as two cores each, so the computer can run two things on each core then and speed up whatever it's working on. That's really kind of like a watered down version of it. But anyway, so Pentiums basically have like two cores and three and four threads now, which actually can make them pretty viable for gaming.
Yeah.
So, but this is where it gets interesting. The performance of it is very similar to that i3, well, all the i3s in the Kaby Lake line.
Well, being
Going,
a whole lot cheaper.
yes. Um, the starting price for these hyper-threaded Pentium CPUs is $64. So if you pair that with like a pretty budget-friendly GPU like the new RX 460 from AMD, you could theoretically build a pretty cheap gaming PC. The only real downside with these new Pentium CPUs is they lack an instruction set in them, which is used a lot in video editing and video transcoding and stuff. So if you're going to be getting into like video editing and stuff, you probably wouldn't want this CPU. But
Yeah.
if you're just going to be doing some light gaming and stuff, then yeah, this is a pretty good buy.
Yeah.
And again, sorry, no, you're going to say something.
No.
Okay. And again, too, like with the i3, how you can always upgrade that to like an i5 or an i7 later on. You can upgrade this Pentium to any of those as well, because they all use like the same motherboard socket and stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah,
So good. Cheaper
yeah,
things.
yeah. Price is going down, and there's a lot more competition now between these two companies, which is pretty good because that way, because Intel's kind of had a monopoly on things for a pretty long time.
Yeah.
All right, so on to the next story, which we're kind of moving away from CPUs and stuff here. We got two stories now about Tesla. Are you familiar with Tesla, Joe?
They make cars.
Yes. What kind of cars do they make?
Like electric and hybrid.
Yes.
Elon Musk.
Yeah.
I know stuff.
Yeah. Elon Musk. He's a great guy. So one Tesla has been working a lot with their like autopilot software and stuff. Um, and on some of their early models, they had things like the automatic parking and all that kind of stuff. But they want to get into like the fully autonomous cars. And so there's kind of been a bit of a battle going on between Tesla and Apple actually, because there's been kind of some secret reports of a secret project at Apple where they're working on a self-driving car. And so, not really super secret since it's been reported a lot,
Yeah.
but yeah. And people are kind of thinking like, hey, maybe this is why Apple's been getting a bunch of ex-Tesla employees lately. Well, the opposite actually happened recently, and Tesla actually picked up an ex-Apple employee. This man was, what was his name?
Matt Casebolt.
Yes, thank you, Matt Casebolt. He is actually the designer of a couple of Apple products, the Mac Pro and the new MacBook. Arguably some of Apple's more questionable decisions lately. But yeah, so he was an ex-Apple employee on the design team, and he's now working at Tesla. And this actually came after Tesla CEO Elon Musk called Apple the Tesla graveyard because they were gobbling up a lot of their older employees. So, yeah. There's also some reports at Apple that 2016 was actually not a very good year for them in general. A lot of, at least in their product development stages, because a lot of their projects that have gone unannounced to the public hit a lot of missed dates and deadlines. So it seems that Apple's planning on some interesting stuff, but they don't really know.
Although even with like a poor development year, I'd have to assume sales last year would have got a big boost with Samsung hitting some snags.
Definitely, yes, and because the iPhone 7 was very popular this year or 2016 as well too, so that helped. And not only that, the newest MacBook Pro, which has been getting a lot of hate actually from people reviewing it because of kind of a change in like Apple's the way they view the professional term. They've been kind of cutting down the MacBook
Hmm.
like in terms of performance, but they haven't really been cutting down its price. The price has kind of stayed the same, but apparently they're selling a lot more MacBook Pros than ever. So yeah, aside from development, Apple's been doing pretty well.
Hmm.
And next, with Tesla is, of course, with electric cars, you got to charge those electric cars. So Tesla originally was offering their superchargers, which are little kind of, they're kind of like gas stations for electric cars.
Yeah, you
And
plug them in, they charge up.
yeah, and with the superchargers, they supercharge, so they're nice and fast. And of course, since there wasn't very many people who owned Teslas, they were actually free for any Tesla owners who owned the Model S, or not the Model S, the Model X, and a couple of the different ones. Actually, I believe it was the Model S. Yeah,
Yeah.
but anyway, so Tesla is now actually starting to charge people to use their superchargers, and interestingly, it's actually a lot cheaper than gas, of course.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was kind of bound to happen eventually. I mean, you can't have just energy for free. know,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it's but currently in depends kind of on the location and on the country. So owners can be either billed per kilowatt or per minute, and reports have been that it was around 40 cents per minute, I believe, or so it's pretty cheap, regardless. Of course, Tesla cars and all electric cars really are pretty expensive when you
Yeah.
boil it down. Interestingly
So
enough,
it's a long run thing if you want to
yeah,
save money doing it.
yeah, and then you also get like your tax breaks and stuff from buying an electric car too in there. So
Yeah.
it does have its benefits. What I do really want to see is Tesla actually has this thing they're working on where with solar panels on your roof, you can actually set like you get a specific battery that charges up and then kind of powers your home at night, and then also can be used to charge your Tesla car in your garage. Because
Yeah.
charging your Tesla just by plugging into the wall is actually very slow. So with this
Yeah.
like special battery, you can get it charged very fast.
Yeah. And a place down here, like in Florida, that would probably be pretty helpful.
Definitely. So I mean, you
Now,
guys have a lot of sun down there.
yeah, with these superchargers and this charging stations in general, like how many are there now? Like, are there any now?
Um, Let me check. Last time I checked, actually, because I actually did like a report on Tesla at one point for school, and they had a very, very fair bit of them. I know you could drive across the country basically and only stopping at superchargers, and you could go pretty much I think around America. Let's see here. So there are 795 stations all around the world, and then that's a total of 5,085 superchargers.
Okay.
So actually, my mistake. That's just in the U.S. And several of those are actually service stations as well, so you can get your car serviced
Hmm.
and as well get your battery replaced. Because that's another service Tesla offers that you can, go there and then they'll just replace your battery real quick, and then when you're making your return trip, you can actually stop there again, and then they'll give you your original battery with your car back fully charged.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm looking at a map of all the stations, with the exception of possibly Nebraska. It's kind of on the border there between Nebraska and Iowa. It looks like every state has at least one, if not more.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's one thing Tesla's been focusing on in the past few years. Actually, is just getting their infrastructure up.
Yeah,
While
because if they had like released big cars without that, then boom, they're gonna tank.
yeah, because like right now they only have the Model S and the Model X, which are their more kind of high end cars. But the more affordable Model 3, people have already put down all their pre-orders and stuff to it. So so that's kind of given them a lot of time to get all these stations built up.
Okay.
So yeah. Um, Anything else you'd like to add on Tesla?
From the very little I know, they seem like a great company.
Yeah, like they've really done a lot in the past few years. I'm really excited to kind of see where they go from here.
Yeah.
So, in other news, there's some sad news here with a popular modified version of Android known as CyanogenMod has been discontinued. This is a little bit of older news, but I figured it was worth sharing because it is pretty big actually. So the way Android works is, you have a company like Samsung makes a phone, and then they get the version of Android, and then they kind of put their own programs in it, their own apps, and make it the way they want it to be, as long as it conforms with Google's rules. So back in the early days of Android, people would get kind of upset, like, wow, I don't really need all this extra stuff Samsung and LG's putting in my phone. So I kind of want my own version of Android that's pretty basic and standard.
Yeah.
So what CyanogenMod was is they took like the basic version of Android from Google, made it into their own, kind of added their own little just a few things in there, but they stayed with the core stock Android. And so they were one of the most popular like aftermarket versions of Android you could install on your phone, and they supported the most devices out of any of the other like little projects people were working on. So unfortunately, on the 24th, the project was discontinued, and pretty a sad day to do that too on Christmas Day or Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
But this comes after the company was partnering with different companies to actually sell CyanogenMod on their phones, and a bit of mismanagement through the company as well. But fortunately, the source code of CyanogenMod is still on GitHub because it's open source, meaning anyone can use it. And
Mhm.
several previous devs have actually already picked up development on it again under a new name called Lineage OS. So Cyanogen will live on in the modding community of Android.
Okay.
And lastly, here we have a news from the App Store. Now, Apple's recently been doing some weird stuff with some developers in the App Store. And recently, a man created an app that helps you find your Apple EarPods if you've lost them. So the Apple EarPods, the $60 pair of wireless headphones from Apple, and if you lose one of them, pretty much they're pretty much useless. And if you lose the case for them, then you also can't charge them. So pretty inconvenient in ways.
It's almost
But
like it would be more efficient just to have them like attached to a little rope that you could then plug into your iPhone or whatever.
man, that'd be revolutionary. I think
Would.
somebody would have thought of that already. Ah, yes, and also it does take $69 actually to replace a lost AirPod. So pretty inconvenient.
Hmm.
Well, there was a man who created a app known as Finder for AirPods on the App Store, and basically what it does is it uses like the range of Bluetooth to allow you to kind of scan and find them as long as they're in close vicinity. If you're out on the street jogging, you won't be able to find them from your house or anything like that.
But if they're under your couch cushions.
Yeah, you'll be able to find them through that. Well, apparently he got a call from Apple, and they had told him that this app was deemed inappropriate for the App Store and had removed it. There was no word if they revoked his developer status, which Apple is known to do to people that they remove apps for. Um, he also has a couple other apps in the App Store, such as like Find My Fitbit, Find My Jawbone for different like Bluetooth watches and stuff.
Hmm.
But specifically, this one was removed by Apple. So it's kind of weird why Apple would just suddenly do that to him and really not give him a straight answer.
Yeah, because in the end, just not like giving a straight answer is going to hurt them a lot more than like if they had like just removed him.
Yeah, because Apple also recently did a thing with another App Store developer because he had used his personal credit card to get his personal Apple account set up in the developer program, but then he had bought a developer license for I think his somebody in his family so they could get into kind of trying out how to develop and stuff.
Yeah.
And Apple heard about that and they revoked his developer status for his personal account and his family member who he bought it for. And they had said, hey, we don't want this to blow up into like a big, social media thing. And they said, so, as long as you just post on your blog, like, hey, and explain why we removed this, then, we'll let this go. But it was kind of a bit of an argument between the developer and Apple, and they didn't. I don't believe they allowed him to put his app back on the App Store in the end. But so kind of interesting, kind of shady, weird.
Yeah, I mean there are possible reasons why, like maybe concerns that this could lead to stealing them from other people, or
That's a good point, actually. Yeah, because all it is just kind of sensing like Bluetooth and like the range of it.
or like use it to track, make like find some way to use it to track people. I don't know. Like I don't think it would necessarily be a huge problem, but I mean, I guess there is the possibility it could be used wrong.
Yeah. Well, there's also a theory too that maybe Apple could be developing their own version, but if they were, then they probably would have given him a more straight answer instead of just saying like, "Hey, this isn't appropriate."
Yeah.
So
And even then, that's like, I mean, it's their marketplace. They're free to do whatever they want. But that is kind of, that's like, hey, we're the only ones who can do it.
yeah, um, I guess yeah, that's really all we have right now. Anything else you'd like to say?
Um, no, I do hope everyone enjoyed listening to Nick talk while I kind of nodded around, said yes.
Yep. I will start ironing out some more news for another episode sometime. We'll be back another time.
Indeed.
Yep. This has been fun. I really don't know how to end these.
This is Nick and Joe with LyteByte Studios saying, have a nice night.
Have a nice night.